Hey everyone, I'm your host, Robbie Straczynski. Thank you so much for joining us on episode number 102 of CardsChat, the friendliest poker podcast in town. Today's guest graduated from the University of Georgia, his home state, with a degree in psychology and has one of poker's greatest nicknames, the Gunslinger. Love that nickname. To date, he has won 3 WSOP bracelets, all in mixed games, with his most notable one being the 2009 50K H.O.R.S.E event. Prior to becoming a poker player for a living, where he's won over $4.3 million in live tournaments over his career, this man was a professional bowler. So we're going to hear all about that and much more as we get to know him a little better.
Hey, bowling
David
trip.
Bach, welcome to the CardsChat Podcast.
Thank you. It's really nice to be on today.
It's good. It's good to see you. I got to meet you a couple weeks ago in Las Vegas, and I understand you're still there. You've been there for a while.
I'm still here. This is by far the longest I've spent in Las Vegas. So I did own a condo out here at one time, but I didn't get to play poker for 2 years with the pandemic. I mean, I played a little online, but that we all know that's nowhere the same.
Right.
And so I really appreciate the chance to play mixed game every day. We play at Resorts World 8160 6 days a week. I probably play 5 of those, and it's been really nice to sit down and play. Although I do miss my family quite a bit.
And you said the longest you've been. So how long have you been there?
Since just before the World Series, so since the end of May.
That is a very long time. My goodness.
I'm going home in 2 weeks for Halloween. I promised my son that, and I miss my wife and son anyway. So
that's good. How old
I got
is
about 2 more weeks here. He's 7.
Oh wow, that is tough to be away from home for a long time. I'm sure you do a lot of like FaceTime and Zoom calls and stuff.
We do, but it's not the same, but we do, yeah.
That's good. Very important. All right. Well, it's good. Well, let's start, David, with what you're perhaps best known for in the poker world. Your first WSOP bracelet, kind of an amazing bracelet to win. It came in 2009. It was a record-breaking final table. It lasted 20 hours, almost 500 hands. So my question is, how can you still play your A game, for that long? And second part is also when it did finally end, when there'll be time enough for counting. When the dealing was done, do you remember what sort of emotions kind of filled you when you did win your first bracelet?
Oh, for sure. All that is still very vivid to me. I first of all, I played a lot of very long home game sessions. Some of I have some people that take little pieces of me in the tournament back home, and they'll remember this because we used to play 40, 50-hour sessions.
Hours?
Kind of routinely, yeah.
Wow.
We'd start a Friday night game and we'd finish like Sunday morning when one of the players had to go to church or meet his family or something.
Wow.
And we played a lot of those sessions, so I got very used to that. My longest one ever was 64 hours, which that I couldn't do anymore. That was a bit much. But
how do you go without sleep for that long?
You just do. You just kind of tough through it. Some of the older guys were medicated. I do, in fact, myself. I have attention deficit disorder, so I take Ritalin, which is a stimulant, so that would keep me awake a little bit through the sessions. But more just just building your body up to it. I've always had a natural, I would say, probably 30 to 40 hour clock.
Wow.
Just naturally, I can kind of stay up like 25, 26 hours and then sleep 12. And that's kind of how I function normally. It doesn't function very well in the world or with my son's school or anything like that. But it can be pretty good for poker at times.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And so you're saying that, well, I mean, I guess maybe that answers that first question as well, of like, how can you stay on your A game for that long?
Yeah, I did that. Also, and a shout out to my friend Matt, who's a masseuse. He was a masseuse in Las Vegas. He's moved to Montana, I believe. Now he's working at a resort. He stayed on site, working way after hours just to give me massages on the breaks.
Wow.
So like I knew you couldn't do it with the cameras and everything. So I knew I'd need a little, pick me up on the break. So he actually stayed and we would do like a 10-minute massage on the breaks. Nice. Over that whole night until we finished at 8 or 10 in the morning, whatever it was.
Well, that definitely helps. So when you did finish, so you said you remember it very vividly. Tell us about those feelings.
One thing interesting, John Hansen remarked to me a couple years later, that was the man I played heads up against, how how was I able to stay with it so long? Because I think he drug out a little bit. He was a very good player. And first of all, I was very focused and I really wanted it bad because I'd had 2 previous runner-up finishes, and you don't get that many bites at the apple at the World Series.
Yeah.
And so I really wanted to play my best. Of course, this is the tournament that a mixed game player wants to win more than anything.
Oh yeah.
So I think motivation,
it's a big deal.
I think motivation had a lot to do with things also.
Oh, very cool. Well, one of the other players, very famous Poker Hall of Famer who was sitting at the final table with you there, was the elusive H.O.R.S.E. We likely won't ever get to have H.O.R.S.E on this show. So maybe you happen to have a H.O.R.S.E story either from the final table or a different time where you may have interacted with him. Those stories are always good.
Huck is a really cool guy. I actually know him fairly well because he's played mixed games with us. You know, he's far from a regular, but he drops in. I think he's not playing as much as he used to, but you can still occasionally see him. He'll whip in for a couple hours and play. And Huck is always somebody I have looked up to. I remember seeing him at Foxwoods this was 1997. And I was watching No Limit. I barely knew how to play No Limit at the time. I was watching the main event. And he was just like a man amongst boys. And you could tell the whole rest of the table was just totally spooked by him because he was just that much better. He was applying concepts that are common today from good players. And he had created those concepts himself in the mid-90s. And that's why he was so dominant.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. And, that's No Limit Hold'em and those sort of concepts. Were they applicable, mixed games as well? Like, what was it like facing him at that final table?
He's by far the best Raz player I've ever played with. I went deep in a Raz tournament. I think I wound up finishing like 8th. No, I finished 2nd in that one, but I was deep in the tournament, the final few tables with him. And I was just looking to observe every single little thing he did just to learn. And he did some really interesting limping strategies that you don't see people do very often. And again, he had people just totally off balance. And I would say that's always been the strength of his game, is being able to keep people off balance, but not give up EV in doing so. Not just make a bad play, but make a different play that was still just as much or more effective.
Is that typical that obviously Huck is a unique type of person to, want to learn from, but is that typical for you that you're kind of like taking notes and trying to learn from other players, or is that just, in unique particular situations?
I would say more with Huck than anybody else, but yes, you can learn something. You can learn something from a bad player. Sometimes a bad player will do something that gives other people trouble. A bad player will do something that gives me trouble, and I'll say to myself, if I'm in the right mode, if I'm in a bad mood and losing or whatever, I might just be frustrated that he's beating me. But if I'm doing the right thing, I should say, well, what is it that's giving me trouble, and how can I put that into my game?
Right. And so especially because you're focused on mixed games, it's not necessarily the typical getting in the lab that all the No Limit Hold'em players do. So what does study mean for a mixed game player? Is it mostly at the table, away from the table? How do you sort of go through hands? Do you talk to other players? What's involved?
You talk to other players. I haven't done that as much as some people because I kind of like to keep some of the secrets to myself since there is so little out there. I'll go back and read some of the limited material that there is on mixed games. There is some decent stuff out there, especially if I haven't played for a while, just to kind of refresh things. I'll take notes during a tournament. Anybody that's kind of seen me at the World Series, they'll see me jotting away on a phone or a tablet or something like that. That's taking notes, which I use to write recaps for the people that take pieces of me. But it also can be very effective to go back and reflect on. Like when I play the same event the next year, I'll go back and I'll look at my notes from a successful run in that same tournament, just to kind of remind myself of some of the things that I did well or didn't do well.
Interesting. I want to harp on actually something said, writing recaps specifically for the people who took pieces of you. So, not to get into any sort of specifics, but clearly that's important to you. And if someone invests in you, they, you feel like you owe them a good and proper report. Can you tell us about that a little bit?
Well, I've been doing that a long time now, since 2005. when I started playing tournaments regularly. I started just writing little email recaps of my day. Over the time, I've developed a nice little shorthand so I can take these notes. And my sponsors have remarked how much they enjoy it. They kind of feel part of the experience. So it has a lot of benefits. First of all, some of my sponsors aren't in it because they want to make money. They don't want to invest in a bad horse, but they enjoy the sweat of it. So that lets them feel like part of the action. For myself, it makes me responsible for what I do. And during these recaps, I try and really be honest. If I screw up, I'll put it in there and try and learn from it. And then if I make a really good play, well, I can learn from that. I've made a note of it, and I can reflect on that and use it. And then I also have a long-term picture of writing a book.
Oh, cool.
I'm not ready to do that yet because, again, I don't want to give away the store while I'm still playing.
Sure.
But as I get a little older, maybe in my mid-60s or something like that, I have a lot of material that I could put into a book that would probably make a really good book.
Awesome. Well, I look forward to reading that one already. Any mixed game stuff, it's always a favorite of mine. Do you ever get feedback, whether from your sponsors, backers, or just anyone who you share your notes with?
I do, not too much, but most of the people that back me don't play at the same level that I do. That they do play, but so they don't really feel. I kind of wish they would give a little more feedback, but I think they feel bad about criticizing and they don't want to get in my head or whatever.
Got it.
But I do get a couple sponsors that will answer, and I always appreciate it, whether it's good or bad.
Sure. I mean, to me, again, just based on black and white statistics alone, you look at someone, $4.3 million in tournament winnings going back 20 years, 3 WSOP bracelets, comfortable playing for, huge limit mixed games. Of course, someone like that offers me an opportunity to back them. Yeah, hell yeah, I'm going for it. I'm wondering from your side, there tends to be, to the best of my knowledge, a lot less variance in fixed limit mixed games as opposed to no limit hold'em or pot limit Omaha, something like that. Why do you believe it's important for you to have backers, sponsors at this stage of your career rather than just go it solo?
So I vary my backing depending on how I'm personally doing. When I first started, it was probably like 65-70% that I would sell. Unfortunately, I have lost a couple backers, just over the years.
Sure.
A couple of backers have passed away. One has Alzheimer's that I feel really bad about. And as I'm doing better, I've had World Series where I've only sold a third. I'm never going to completely get rid of I have a lot of sponsors that are, I'm talking about a lot of people that take like 1%, 2%, 3%.
Sure.
It's not going to really affect the bottom line that much. So those guys, and I've always been a very loyal person. If somebody wants to be part of the backing, they're going to be part of the backing. Even if I won 100 million in a lottery and I didn't care about the money, I would still have those same sponsors on board, maybe a lesser percentage, but they would still be on board.
That's great.
And it's nice to have, poker has its ups and downs. And there's times where I've gone into a World Series saying, well, look, I need to sell a little more this year. COVID did that for me. I had a couple years where I just spent money and wasn't making any.
Right.
We all know that that's not very good for the bankroll. So
for sure.
And speaking where you're speaking about the variance in mixed games, variance in mixed games is definitely lower than a game like Pot Limit Omaha.
Right.
Inherently, I think No Limit Hold'em actually has a little less variance, or at least it used to when the fields were really soft. Now they've gotten a little tougher. I have had pretty consistent results over the years. I've won from 2005 to 22, so we're talking 15 years. I've 12 of those years are winning years. The 2 that were losing were like less than 10% losing.
Right.
And I've only had 1 year where I got back like less than half of what I bought in for. So it is pretty consistent, but there's a lot of variance in there. And like if I was just playing the 1500s, I wouldn't feel the need to take backing. But the 10K and the 50K, I mean, those are big buy-ins.
Yeah, those are some big swings.
For example, This World Series, I had a very good World Series by metrics. As far as the amount of events I played like 20 events, and I had a fourth and a ninth place. But my fourth and ninth place came in $2,500 and $3,000 buy-ins, and I whiffed the 50K and I whiffed the 10Ks.
Yeah.
Well, I had one cast in the 10K, so I wound up just eking out a very small profit.
Right.
Even though I, because my finishes didn't come in the right events.
I think it's so important. Yeah, it's so important to, first of all, I love the transparency and putting it out there. It's really great. And, all of us, the Cards Chat community as well, there's just like, you see numbers, like I said, black on white, but you don't necessarily know the entire story behind it. And, it's so important to keep in mind. You said, well, you whiff a couple of the big buy-in events. Yeah, it's tough to eke out a profit, even if you do well on a couple of the smaller ones. So it makes a lot of sense.
One thing I think my sponsors really appreciate is before I write the World Series proposal or any tournament proposal, I list every buy-in, expenses. I include expenses as part of my sponsorship, which I know a lot of players don't. But I feel like my skill level justifies that, and it's not an incredible expense, but maybe $7,000 or $8,000 during the World Series for lodging.
Absolutely, yeah.
So over the course of the World Series, I don't have my numbers right in front of me, but it's roughly I've spent $3 million and gotten back like $4.6 million over the course of the whole time.
Wow.
And to match that against just about anybody over time.
I know a lot of us in the media kind of wish, you only see, amount one. What a difference it would make. I'm like, no one really knows the entire truth of everyone's results, wow, if everyone posted, well, how much did you lose? Also, that would put things into a lot of perspective, I think, for a lot of people. Definitely want to talk a lot more mixed games, WSOP bracelets, WSOP itself. But we got to go back to the first frame. You had a career as a professional bowler. You were showing off the T-shirt there. And, I just kind of want to know, was it at all, the only bowling I really know, was it at all like the Bill Murray, Woody Harrelson, Kingpin? I just kind of want to know, unless your name is, was it Walter Ray Williams Jr. or Pete Weber? What is it like bowling for a living?
Okay, so I started... I played golf on my high school golf team. I've always been kind of a quasi athlete. And I took up bowling when I was 16, and I started getting really good at it when I was like a freshman in college. And I started bowling tournaments on the weekends. We're talking $50-$60 entry fee. You might spend a couple hundred on some extra side bets, and I would pay my bills that way. My dad would help me out a little bit, but mostly I was paying my bills that way. I used to pot bowl, which that term may not be familiar, but you'd have 10 people throw in $5 or $10 in bowl a game, and whoever bowled the highest game got all the money.
That's cool.
And then that branched out as I got a little better into two levels of bowling. I used to go to these megabucks tournaments. We're almost always in Las Vegas, 2 or 3 times a year.
Right.
And those had big entry fees of like $1,000, $1,500, even $2,000, which was a lot of money at the time for my age and also for the bowling community.
Sure.
And I also bowled some professional tournaments as an amateur at the time. And those, they have regional events that are not the ones that are on TV, but you still compete against a lot of the same level. And I would bowl those in Georgia and Florida and Virginia and North Carolina and all that kind of stuff. On the regional level, I was not very successful because I wasn't good enough. I had a couple good finishes, a couple top 15 finishes, and some cashes, but those guys were better than me. On the megabuck level, I had some more success because I wasn't competing against professionals.
Right.
And they also had really hard conditions at these tournaments to kind of level the field. And I was a good spare shooter. So in 1992, I came out to one at Samstown. And that was actually right when I was beginning to play poker, because I played a little poker on the side time. And my first match, I bowled a guy named Mike Newman, who anybody that knows anything about bowling will know. He's from New York and one of the best amateurs ever. Yeah. And I drew him in the first round in a match play tournament, which was bad luck. And I managed to beat him.
Oh, wow.
And that gave me so much confidence. And I had also been bowling a lot. I'd been competing against a really good bowler back home who sharpened my game. So I wound up going all the way through the field to the final match. I had a chance to win. I left the 10 pin when I needed to strike in the 10th frame, but I made a good shot. And I wound up winning $25,000 for that tournament.
That's pretty
which
nice.
At my age is, I guess, my second year in college. That was all the money in the world.
Oh,
I was able to buy a new car. And I stayed with bowling. I kept bowling on the amateur level. In 2000, I was already starting to have some success as a poker player, and the Professional Bowlers Association got bought by some ex-Microsoft people, and they put a lot of money into it. And I said to myself, it's not about the money, but I always wanted to know, can I compete against the best? So let me give it a shot. I went to the thing called the Kegel Training Center in Florida, really honed my game the best I could. I practiced, I got new equipment. And I went out and I bowled 4 tour stops, the US Open and 3 other tour stops, just to see where I stood. And there were, not that I couldn't have lived out there and maybe, eventually learned enough to get some checks and maybe make a TV show.
Right.
But there were between 5 to 10 guys out there that were just better than me on a level that I was never going to get to. And we're talking about the famous names like Norm Duke and Walter Ray Williams. And I would watch those guys bowl, and they were just better. They just they made more consistently accurate shots than I think I could have ever gotten to. And given the way bowling pays, that there's not that much money in it to begin with,
right?
And what money there is, you need to make TV shows,
right?
It just didn't make any sense. So I'm happy that I gave myself a shot. I got to bowl with those great guys.
Yeah.
But I realized that there's that next level that I think I'm at poker. I could never get to in bowling.
So was the goal just to sort of, when you started with the bowling, was it more of I really want to try and reach the top, or is it really, this is a cool, fun way to try and just support myself and make a living, even at my level, if it's not, A+, it's still, A- or B+ level. And I'm cool with that. Was that the goal, or was it something else?
I don't know that I ever thought about it that way. I'm sure I wanted to be a professional. There's no doubt about that. But it wasn't I just kept trying to get better every day. And I enjoyed the tournaments. I enjoyed the competition. And keep in mind, I was a college student at the same time, so I had multiple options as to what I could do.
Right.
I thought about
my next question. Yeah.
Actually, before poker ever came around, I kind of thought that I was going to end up either being a professional bowler, or if I wasn't good enough, I could go into one of the training programs and be a manager or a regional manager for a company like Brunswick. I know I'd be good at that. I worked at a bowling alley for a while, actually almost 3 years. And so that was really the last job I had. And I know I would have been very good at that. I love the sport. I knew it inside and out and what the customers would want. But once the poker bug bit, that was it for normal jobs. So.
For sure. Well, I got one last, I think, pre-poker question for you. So all the stuff you're talking about, I'm wondering how, if at all, it ties into the fact that you studied psychology. Why did you choose that as a major? And was there any sort of, thought that you'd progress in that field at all?
I did consider that. My father, who I'm very close with, he passed away in 2009 after I won the big tournament, which I was thrilled he got to see that. He was a clinical psychologist and had a private practice in Athens, Georgia for, 25 years at least.
Right.
And that was ready-made for me if I wanted that as a job. The problem is to get to that level, you're talking about a lot more school than what I went to. I would have had to get a master's, a doctorate, internship. And to put that much time into schooling, you have to be sure that it's what you want. When I graduated college, I decided to give poker a shot, knowing that I could give it a year or so, and if it flamed out, I could go back to school. But I was successful right from the get-go with poker. So
right.
And the psychology aspect, obviously my father's a psychologist. I've been God blessed with a real talent in psychology. I'm very good at reading people and kind of knowing what they're going to do based on the psychology of that person in that moment.
Well, that's a
I'm able
helpful
to
skill
use
at the
that.
table.
Yeah, I'm able to use that in poker,
For sure.
and I use that in a lot of aspects of my life. During the pandemic, and really right now, I've been doing a lot of daily fantasy. And at first, I sucked at it, just like anytime you're new at something. But what I learned to do is, even though it's a very statistics-driven sport, I take my psychology and I apply it to daily fantasy. Being that when I'm successful, it's because I'm watching the games and I'm seeing interviews from players and getting and kind of trying to get in their head and get something that the numbers aren't quite showing.
Interesting. It's like the guys who stand by the stables and try to hear the jockey talking to the horse and listen to something. I
Yeah.
Very cool. So poker kind of began to become more a part of your life. You said you started to find success pretty much right away. Did you have any like early influences? Were you studying, besides saying, "Oh, okay, this is cool and I'm earning money," what was sort of giving you the hunger to keep on playing more and more?
I read every book that I could get my hands on. And actually back at the beginning, it wasn't that easy to there wasn't Amazon and all that. So if I took a trip to Las Vegas for bowling, I'd come back with 10 poker books. I'd go to Gambler's book club
store,
or Gambler's General Store, and I'd buy every book that looked like it was even decent. And at the time, I should be doing it more now, but at the time I would work out after my poker sessions, and I'd read one of the poker books or reread it. I actually did something pretty neat in this was 1997, I believe. I walked up to David Sklansky and asked him for a poker lesson.
That's
he
cool.
was playing a game at the time. He said, "Sure, just buy me dinner and give me a couple $100 and I'll give you a poker lesson." So we went to the Chinese restaurant at the Golden Nugget and just sat with him for like an hour and a half and asked him questions.
Wow. And what do you remember from like having learned from the experience?
So I learned from him, and what I was having trouble with that wasn't in the books was matchups. Matchups are very important in 7-card stud, which was the first game I got real good at, and the game I was specializing in the casinos when I first started to go.
Right.
And what I found was in certain games they played very loose, and certain hands would match up very poorly to loose games. So what I'm talking about is like a pair of jacks with like a 6 kicker, where the most likely good hand you're going to make is jacks up, which heads up, that's great. But if you're playing in a 5-way pot, jacks up is probably not going to win at the end of the hand.
Right.
And so we discussed, how to deal with those type of games and maybe like not even play that pair of jacks or play it real cautiously, trying to make a big hand out of it, especially if it's dead. But then the hands that are favorable are like your ace high 3 flushes. And when you get a huge hand like a rolled up, you're going to get more action on it.
Sure. So at what point did you start saying to yourself, okay, beyond enjoying this and being good at it and, making some money, say, okay, maybe I could do this for a living and, rest comfortably, not having to go back to, being an employee at a bowling alley?
I think I knew it right away. I had a lot of success at poker right away. I mean, I have a gift for it. And I had my struggles on my first casino trips because you're playing against a different level of opponent.
Sure.
But the home games, I would just win almost every session. Now, some of that was benefited by the fact that we're playing 40-hour sessions and I was in my 20s and fresh.
Right.
Early in my career, I would have a little cycle where I'd win like 20,000 in a month at home, do that for 2 months, and I'd come out to Vegas or go to the Commerce and I'd blow most of that money and have to go back home. Eventually, I got good enough to beat those games on the road also.
Right. So I want to actually ask about that dynamic. Your home state is Georgia. To the best of my knowledge, there's certainly no casinos, but I don't think there's any poker clubs, or maybe one. I heard like Little Kings and Queens or something. Like there really isn't.
They got shut down.
Yeah, right. So like this,
yeah.
I mean, you talk about like basically all you had was and continues to be home games. So how did that work? I mean, how often were you able to play? If you're doing this for a living, so how are you able to do that? And how often did you have to leave home and go and find casinos and poker rooms elsewhere?
So that changed for me as my life changed. When I was younger, I used to play like 3 days a week, but they were long days. And I would play. I drive to Atlanta. I made a couple connections through going to Biloxi, Mississippi, which is about a 7-hour drive. I used to go there on the weekends before I knew there were any games.
Okay.
So I would go to Mississippi. I made a connection with a guy that dealt cards in Atlanta, and I found out about some home games, and then you get to know people.
Yeah.
And so I would play like 3 days a week in Atlanta. I might play one more day in this little log cabin we used to play at in a town called Cornelia, Georgia. That was actually the first place I ever played poker. My dad took me there when I was on my 21st birthday. And they played 7-card stud with paper money.
Wow.
We used to play in this log cabin. One time, how rustic this was. One time there was a scorpion that crawled across the middle of the table, and somebody flicked it on my lap. I've never stood up that fast from a poker table.
Now I know what you mean by you say you got a lot of material to put in a book. That's a great story.
Yeah.
So that's cool stuff.
And so I used to play in that home game. I used to play in the home games in Atlanta, which were a little more sophisticated with dealers and chips and all that kind of stuff. And I kept doing that. And then I would go to the World Series every year. I'd go, to the LA Poker Classic.
Yeah.
And then around 2008, I met my now wife. And I was already kind of playing a little bit more in casinos than I was in home games, but I was still fine with playing in home games. But also, in the mid 2000s, poker boomed and got real popular.
Yeah.
And what started happening is some of the games in Atlanta started getting robbed.
Oh.
And I never cared about getting busted. It never happened to me, but I never cared. The worst thing to do is give you a little fine. But robbery is scary because you never know what a criminal will do if they panic.
Sure.
And I didn't want to get shot. And actually, one of the games my friend ran, somebody got shot. They actually got their balls shot off. I mean, it was pretty bad.
Wow.
So I kind of said to myself, I still tinkered with the home games a little bit up through my wife getting pregnant. But once she got pregnant and we had a son, I'm just like, this is not worth it.
Right.
Yes, I can make money in these home games, but it's just not worth the risk. And so I have not played a home game in 7.5 years, and probably won't unless it's an extremely secure situation.
Sure.
Even the last couple of years when I did play, I was playing in an American Legion where we gave half the rake to charity, and it was basically protected by the police because it was an American Legion.
Sure. Wow. So I have to ask then, so many poker players, they go ahead, pick up and move to Vegas, or, it doesn't have to be there. It could be anywhere where there's, they always say your home casino, where it's an hour drive or less. So why is that something that, or maybe that is something that you thought of doing, but something's maybe kept you specifically rooted in Georgia?
Well, I'll tell you, we had some long discussions about that, me and my wife. Because it is very hard. I don't get to work as much. When I go home, it's hard for me to leave. And so therefore I'm not earning as much as I should because I stay at home. Vegas was the first place we discussed. It's natural because I'm already here for the World Series 2 months a year anyway. I even bought a condo back in 2012 here when the games were really good. The problem is I don't think Las Vegas is a good place to raise my son. My wife and I both love it. It's great. All the restaurants, all the stuff that there is to do. But I just don't think it's a good place to raise a son. I'm not saying you can't, there's plenty of friends I have that do a great job with their kids here.
Sure.
And of course the parents are way more important than the town, no matter what. But I just see all the kind of scumminess in Las Vegas, the people sleeping on the street, and the one thing that I really like about Georgia is, for the most part, when somebody tells you they're going to do something, they do it. They're honest. And you don't get that as much in Las Vegas. And I just, I didn't really want to my son's already got a poker player for a father. I don't want to raise him in Las Vegas. So that was ultimately the no to Las Vegas. I have thought about some other cities. Phoenix is a place that I'm still considering. But we have a nice little house that I've lived in since 1999. It's nothing fancy, but we have like 3/4 of an acre of property, and it's quiet. There's trees, there's birds, there's deer running through our yard every day. It's just a nice place to live and grow up.
That's nice.
And my wife likes it there. And these days with the housing prices and land being, it would be very hard to duplicate that somewhere else without multi-millions of dollars.
That's fair. So and then you can always just get on the plane. You don't have to drive 7 hours anymore if you don't want to. So
and I'll tell you something else, being honest about it, for a relationship, it's not so bad to have little breaks. This is what I'm doing now is way longer than I want. But for me to go away for 2 weeks and come back home, you appreciate each other more. Because when I'm at home all the time. Like I'm not somebody that's going off to work for 8 hours a day. I'm at home all the time. You can get on top of each other a little bit like that. So part of the traveling is not so bad, but currently it's too much. In a perfect world, I'd have a private plane and I could fly back and forth.
Or just have them join you for a day or two.
Actually, I did have my wife and son come out after the series and before school started.
Oh, that's nice.
Spend some time together. So
that's great.
Well, and my son absolutely loves Las Vegas, which is probably yet another reason why he shouldn't be living here. He likes it too much.
Well, absence does make the heart grow fonder in a very real way. Well, you have, obviously, we talked a lot about live poker, and you said online poker, of course, and we all know is not the same thing. But you've won the Triple Crown online. You've done quite a lot of, you had a lot of success online. Do you play it all online these days? And if so, or if not, what is it that you did or do enjoy about online play? When physical tells and all that stuff is just not really, even the psychology to a degree is not as much part of it as in live poker.
The best thing about online poker, and it's really important and it blows everything else away, is the speed. The amount of hands you can get in is awesome, especially in tournaments. There's a much better chance for the skill to come to the top when you're playing a lot of hands. Currently, I play in a online poker club that Alan Kessler started. John Turner was actually part of founding it, and they invited me in fairly early in the process. I'm actually one of the administrators. I help with the rules and if there's any controversies or anything like that.
Right.
And we've got a nice little group. We all know each other. You have to be approved. It's not hard to get in, but you have to post unless you're really well known. And we use free software, and we're able to just settle amongst ourselves. We pay somebody a couple bucks a tournament to do the bookkeeping, and it's been a great place to play during the pandemic. And I still play on there some. Also, really helped me sharpen my tournament skills, just getting that many reps in. And I love that group. I like playing online. We play a 2-hour tournament, and it's like an 8-hour tournament because we're getting so many hands in. Everybody in the group plays pretty fast.
Right.
And so, we get a lot of hands in. That part's really nice. And yes, I disparage online poker because I have some problems with it, but I have had a lot of success. I've won the Sunday Million. I won a couple scoops and a couple W coops. And I'm going to go ahead and put this out there. I've been kind of hesitant. I was actually waiting for till I won the main event or something, but I have a real problem with Pokerstars. I'm going to tell you this story. Now I've kept this to myself, and I didn't even think about it till I didn't think I was going to tell you this today, but I feel like it's time. Okay. My wife was pregnant 7 years ago. So 2014, 15. And I had, we lived in Panama together. So I set up a PokerStars account in Panama and played from there quite a bit when I was down there. And I always had an amazing relationship with Pokerstars. I did interviews for them. I'd won some of their big tournaments. I liked the company. Now, they had, during this time, gotten sold, and they weren't the same company. So I had never thought about like VPNing or doing anything like that. I played by the rules. I set up I had a house in Panama. I sent them a utility bill. I got approved and all that kind of stuff. Well, what happened now is like I talked about earlier, sometimes you go through stretches in poker where your bankroll is not quite what you want it to be. And I wanted to work. But my wife was here on a fiance visa. She's from Colombia, and she was pregnant. And I didn't feel that I could leave her here as not a good English speaker and pregnant. I couldn't leave her here alone and go out of the country. I just couldn't.
Right.
And she couldn't go out of the country because she was on a fiance visa. So I had heard during that Summer's World Series from a friend, turned out to be bad advice, that you could play on a VPN. And the worst thing they would do is maybe suspend you for like 6 months. So I decided to try it. First time I ever did it, I had a friend that helps me with computers at home. He set me up a VPN. I deposited $8,000 from a transfer with somebody else that I knew that played on Pokerstars. And I played for a week and I got caught. In that week, I put in 8,000. I won 4. Pokerstars caught me. They sent me a mail telling me, that they had suspicions. I was honest with them. I spent an hour and a half, 2 hours on a phone call with a guy named Fritz from their security team. He was very nice. I was totally honest with him. I figured, just throw myself on their mercy, and maybe they'll end up suspending me. But I did it. I have to be honest about it. I've never thought VPNing was something all that bad, or would have never done it. It's not like, I'm not a person that would ever cheat in any way. VPNing is just, you're just playing from a different hotel room or a different house. It doesn't affect the poker play. So, but I did it. They decided to take all of my money, not just the what I won, but the deposit also. They gave it to charity. I actually played with the person the other 2 days ago. I played with a person that used to work for Pokerstars. They gave my money to charity, so I know it did get given to charity. And I figured I would just have to eat it, and eventually, maybe they'd let me back in. What I'm mad about is they basically threw the book at me. I tried a couple different times. I waited a couple years. I sent them an email. They said no. I waited a few more years. I sent them another email. And the last time that I wrote them, they replied me with the nastiest email, basically like telling me that I was like the scum of the earth, that I was like cheating their system and cheating other players, and that that my ban was a lifetime ban. And I'm furious with them as a company. And that's why I'm telling you this story now, even though it's probably not the greatest story for me to tell. They're just, currently, they used to be a great company, but currently they're a lousy company. They treat people really poorly. They were actually, and actually, back up a little bit, I need to tell you kind of the middle of this story. One of the times when I was trying to get reapproved by them, they actually said they would give me my account back if I could tell them other people that were VPNing and somebody that was running a VPN ring. Now, first of all, I didn't even know these people were.
Right? Yeah, you don't do that stuff.
But if I did know, I wouldn't rat out my friends for something as innocent as VPNing anyway. But that goes to show you how hypocritical they were being. They weren't just suspending me because what I did was wrong, which I could kind of understand. But they were willing to give me my account back if I'd rat other people out. And that together with the last email that they sent me, I'm just furious with the company, and so I wanted to get this story out there because it should be out there.
Well, honesty is very important. It's important to speak your mind, not censor yourself or anything like that. And sometimes it's just difficult situations. One thing everyone could kind of agree on, and again, kudos for your honesty about you said you did do it, like that sort of a thing. But the whole idea of having to VPN in the first place is just unfortunate that they're not fully licensed. We all wish that back in the days, before Black Friday, anyone could just log in from anywhere and play. Those were the golden years because there's always billions of games to choose from. Like, it's just unfortunate because at the end of the day, like the era of prohibition of alcohol and stuff, it's something people want to do. And, it's the necessity of like, oh, I want to play. So, okay, this is the way I can do it. And, you explained your own particular extenuating circumstances there. And like, there's always exceptions to rules or whatever it be, but, the situation is what it is. But, kudos to you for your honesty, David. It's important to, always, to speak.
Thank you. And the reason why I've been hesitant about that is because I'm not the most famous person in poker, but I have some fame. I would like to, work with a casino or work with an online company in the future. And I was a little hesitant to tell that story because the fact of the matter is I did break the terms of service.
Yeah.
But
there is such a thing as time served, though. So.
Yeah, I feel in my heart what I did was like next to nothing. I mean, look, Justin Bonomo multi-accounted, which I really feel is wrong. And he's one of the big famous people in poker. And I know the poker community looks on VPNing as like the very smallest offense that you could possibly ever do.
Yep. Well, the last question I have for you, we're not there yet, but the last question I had sort of, wants to, you're obviously someone of, of integrity and, speaks honestly, like you said, also like, in Georgia, they tell you something, they're going to do it. So I'm curious to hear your thoughts. We'll get to that towards the end of my questions, but did want to ask you a little bit more about the mixed game stuff. You said you started playing, in the 90s.
Okay.
People don't necessarily know that, before the moneymaker era, where we're so used to it, it's 20 years almost of moneymaker already. And, No Limit Hold'em being on our TV screens, the World Poker Tour, etc. Back in the 90s, when you said you want to go and play poker, 7-card stud was the game. Maybe you'll find some limit hold'em and that sort of stuff. Is that where you got the mixed game bug from and just sort of carried on from there? Or is there something specific about mixed games that you enjoy more than the no limit hold'em?
Both. We started out, I started out playing 7-card stud as one of my main games. We also used to play a little home game that we would play that was dealer's choice.
Okay.
You could basically whatever you can make up.
Yep.
The games that I played in Atlanta when I first started playing there. Funny story is when I first started playing in Atlanta, H.O.R.S.E actually dealt to me at the first game I played in.
Oh,
and
that's funny.
And then very shortly after that, he was playing, and we were all playing $3 and $6 limit. At one time, I was playing. He's not as famous, but excellent player. A guy named Mark Wilds.
What's
so
Mark
name? Wilds, H.O.R.S E, and
Wilds,
myself.
yeah.
Mark Wilds. He lives in Mississippi. We were all playing in the same game. The poor other people in the game were playing with a 4% uncapped rake, and they're playing with 3 people that are going to be future successful professionals. But we would play dealer's choice, and you had to play pretty well to beat a 4% uncapped rake. And so I played all those sort of mixed games, and I used to play a horse game where they I don't know how they came up with this, but the signs for the games were the letters H.O.R.S.E, like brass letters that you would see on like a door for like apartment H.
Okay.
And that's what we actually used to indicate what the game was.
Well, okay. Okay, I'm curious. So we talked about tournaments, we talked about cash games. I mentioned that I had the pleasure, privilege of playing with you recently in that mixed game that you're referring to. How is it different? Again, you don't want to give away the farm, the book, that sort of a thing, but what strategically is different going into a mixed cash game versus a mixed tournament?
Cash game versus a tournament.
Because you're pretty. The reason I ask is because you're pretty deep stacked usually in both. So beyond just having that one tournament life and wanting to survive to the end. When you go into a session like that, what sort of strategy, if there's any sort of particular differences or approaches to it?
So the level of player that can survive in a cash game is much higher. Especially at, once you get into the, higher or mid stakes limits that I'm playing at, the 8160 and higher. The average player is like the best player at a tournament table. So the cash game lineup is going to be much tougher. But balancing that is in a tournament, people are really trying their best. Sometimes people in a cash game, they're distracted, or they have plenty of money. They don't care if they lose, or they're drinking, or they're eating, or watching the ball game. So people aren't playing as hard in a cash game, but they're much better players. They understand the fundamentals. So in a tournament, you're playing with worse players. Something that I've always been pretty good at is playing against bad players, like that requires some kind of unusual, like maybe not by the book adjustments. And so that, I think that's one of the reasons I've had a lot of success in tournaments. The other thing that happens in tournaments in the later stages is pressure. And people will respond to the pressure in some rather unusual ways. Sometimes they play a lot worse. And I've always been kind of well trained under pressure from going back to the bowling that we talked about. I was always somebody that was good under pressure in bowling. And to respond under pressure in bowling is much harder than poker, even though the poker is so much more money. Because in bowling, you have to control your body and your mind at the same time. And where in poker, all you have to do is control your mind. And so it's actually much easier. I've never found, if anything, the pressure in poker makes me hyper focus and play better.
Nice. Cool. Very interesting.
And so I think that addresses your question pretty well.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for sharing that. That's, like I, as much as I loved it, I know I have not played many mixed game tournaments, so it's always curious to hear someone who's obviously done both, to hear the difference. Thank you for sharing that. Do you have a particularly favorite game, like in dealer's choice, that you wouldn't call it because then everyone knows it's your game, but if someone else calls that game, you're like, okay, good, this is going to be a good one.
Well, in dealer's choice, you do have to be responsive to the table, and you also have to be responsive to the stage of the tournament. That's actually, I think dealer's choice is by far the best poker tournament format because of that, because there's so much variety you can choose based on what the other people are doing, where the stacks are at, all those sorts of things. But I generally like to choose, like early in a tournament, I'll choose a game like H.O.R.S.E, which people, despite the reputation as being simple, a lot of people play it pretty badly. And it's a one winner game, which lets you acquire chips, which that's what you're trying to do early in the tournament. And then later in the tournament, I'm a little more responsive to what other people are playing poorly, but I'll also start to look at where the stacks are at, particularly as you approach the final table. Like the dealer's choice that I won in 2017, I had a big chip lead at the final table, and I chose no limit single draw, even though that's not my best game, because you can put immense pressure on people. Basically, anytime I had like a good draw or a made rough hand, I could put somebody all in for their tournament life. And I was able to really apply the pressure in a game like that.
Very cool. Interesting. Okay. Well, one of the things folks know about mixed games, they tend to be, especially these days, significantly chattier than a typical no limit hold'em table.
Oh, for sure, and faster.
Yeah. So one of the questions we always ask our CardsChat interviewees: could you tell us the friendliest player you've ever had the pleasure of competing against?
Oh wow, that's a tough question.
You can name more than one if more than one comes to mind.
Wow, I mean, I play with a lot. The group that we play currently at Resorts World, we're just really like fun people. I will say we have some really fun discussions. Ali Najad is one of the regulars, and he does the poker commentary. He has an incredible wit, and we'll be sitting at the poker table, and we'll bring up stuff that's like so politically incorrect and telling these funny stories, and it's just, we have a hilarious time at the poker table.
Okay, that's fair. Well, Ali Najad, folks, if you already, I'm sure everyone knows him, but if you didn't know this, folks, we had him on episode number 60, so you could listen to him Yeah, it was a really cool interview. I did that one in person. That was a good one. So yeah, so thank you for sharing that one. So here's a trivia question for you, David. You're on the Georgia all-time winningest tournament player list. You're number 5. Can you name the 4 players ahead of you?
I fallen all the way to 5. Wow. I
Well,
know
you're
Josh H.O.R.E.
very close to number 4.
I know Josh H.O.R.E. is ahead of me. I believe Daniel Weinman had an excellent World Series and moved ahead of me.
He is not ahead of you.
No, he's not. Okay. Billy Baxter, would he be ahead of me, or
Nope.
he doesn't play enough anymore? To tell you the truth, I don't know the other ones then.
Okay, Kerry Katz originally.
Oh, of course, Kerry's. I think of him from Las Vegas.
Right.
Kerry and I are very friendly. I actually talked with him on the phone like a month ago because
cool.
we're both graduates of the University of Georgia. For some reason, I didn't think of him from being from Georgia because he's
right. He's so
I think he's
associated with
now.
Las Vegas. I think he's got like 30. I think he's probably top 13 or 14 all time. He's got 35.
And the stakes he's playing it, and don't let him fool you. He's a much better poker player than he would want you to know. So
you don't get to that high on the money list, even at those limits, without being a good player. That's for sure. So he's number 1, Josh H.O.R.E. number 2, Ankush Mandavia number 3, and number 4.
I know him. I didn't know he was from Georgia.
Oh, okay. And number 4, George Home Game Holmes. Finished runner-up in the main event.
Yeah. I saw him playing the main event. Yeah.
But you are within about $40,000-$50,000 of catching him. So he's got 2 results on his entire Hendon Mob profile. So I think you'll probably catch him pretty soon. 2, 3 more questions, then we'll get to the community question. You okay on time, by the way?
Oh, of course, yeah.
Okay,
no
cool. Okay, so you've reached 13 WSOP final tables. Poker has evolved a lot. We said your first bracelet was in 2009. You win bracelets number 2 and 3 in 2017. There's a gap there. And we always talk, over the last 10, 15 years of how much Hold'em strategy has evolved and the learning curve, and people are getting so much better, so much more quickly. And consistently, you continue to perform, be successful, and, be at the top. What's that like, making these final tables across this this gulf of time? What has that felt like for you? Or has there not really, you can't really, I mean, maybe when you're in the moment, it's difficult to notice the difference, but no, here you are, a podcast, maybe you can reflect on what the final table dynamic, the final table experience is like nowadays, the last couple of years versus, when you first started making final tables.
But first of all, I'm a poker player. And my job is to evolve with the times. I'm a way better poker player now than I was in 2005. But the game has gotten quite a bit tougher. If I could go back and put my skills I have now in 2005, there's still luck, but I'd win a lot.
Yeah.
Especially at no limit. My no limit game is leaps and bounds better than it was. The mixed games themselves, some of them have not changed that much. Like the fundamentals of Raz and Stud 8 or better are not that different. There are some games that have been a little kind of quote solved, at least in our cash game level. Like I think people play a game like Triple Draw close to perfectly in our cash game. People still play it terrible in the tournaments. And that's what I was talking about the difference between the cash game skill and the tournament skill.
Right.
A lot of people know like what they're supposed to talk about and what they're supposed to be thinking about at the final table, like ICM and how things change on the pay schedules and different things. But when you put people under the heat of that final table, people are still people, and they're going to respond to the pressure in many different ways. And that's always going to be an edge that I'm going to have is looking at that person, really closely observing what's going on and adjusting to that. And I don't think that's ever going to change. And then the other thing that's changed that I wanted to comment on is, there's so much great computer technology out there now, particularly like for a game like Limit Hold'em, which is almost kind of solved in some ways. That's why in our mixed games, we're constantly creating new variations of poker, games like Dramaha and Double Board Omaha, because we want to keep that element of poker where you have to think for yourself, not where you can just look on your not where you can just look on your phone and see, well, this is the right way to play this hand.
Right.
And I think the only way to do that these days is to create new games.
I like it. Oh, very definitely resonates strongly with me. And I want to put 30, 40, 50 plex. Sure, bring them on. Oh, I like it. So we'll get to the last one before we get to the community questions. I mentioned I prepped you in advance. I said we got a little bit of a doozy for the last question. Through Twitter, but also, of course, now through talking with you. And folks, if you've been listening till now, you can see David's clearly someone with a very strong moral code, not just at the table, but also away from the felt. It's a big question. We're all aware of, the big hand everyone's talking about. Is it cheating? Isn't? I don't want to get into the weeds there, but there's kind of been a lot going on, which you could classify or categorize under, scandalous part of poker in the, last couple of years or so. What are your thoughts on all of that in general, or if you want to be specific, totally fine. And, if, you could wave some sort of magic wand and clean up the game somehow, what would you like to see more of, and what would you like to see less of?
Okay, so there's a few things. First of all, I'm going to quickly give my opinion on the Robbie scandal.
Not this Robbie. Just letting everyone know, the different Robbie, the one without the
okay. On the Hustler Casino Live stream. I've actually spent more time than I should following it, so I'm reasonably well informed. There's no way anybody knows for sure, first of all. My personal psychological read, which is my area of strength, is that she's innocent, that she's just an emotional person, made an emotional bad play at the table. You see it all the time, and then tried to come up with some goofy reasons to justify it. I totally could be wrong. She could be guilty. There's plenty of evidence pointing that way. But that's my read at this moment.
Okay.
Moving on to some of the other stuff that's going on in poker, I wanted to address the RFID chips in cards because I feel very strongly about that. I have felt very strongly about that. I talked to Jack Effel about it when it first came around. I don't agree with it. I don't think there should be a chip in the cards that either the shuffler or somebody with the right computer equipment can identify what card it is. I think that's a horrible idea. Now, I get the need for poker to be on TV. I'm all for that. I think it's good for the game. We should be doing it with the original cameras, the lipstick cameras
underneath the table, like that sort of thing.
Yes, and they should be hardwired into a room where they're not seen by anybody except production on a 15-minute delay. That way, the cards can be known by production. You can put the broadcast on a 30-minute delay. So you can have 15 minutes where that gives enough time for any hand to expire. Nobody's going to know the cards, but they are going to be stored for the production team. And then they'll have an additional 15 minutes to put it on the air where they have the information. Hardwired, nobody can hack in. Nobody has the information on the cards. There's too much money at stake. And when there's this kind of money at stake that we're talking about in these cash games, hundreds of thousands of dollars, or God forbid this happens during the main event, because it could, there's $10-12 million to the winner of the main event. You're telling me that's not enough motivation for somebody to cheat. The RFID chips in the cards, in my opinion, are a total no-no. And even more so, I know a lot of people don't know this, but the shufflers can read the cards. The shufflers know what cards are coming out of the deck.
Really? I didn't know that. That's interesting.
Yes. In the casino, I've been playing recently a game called Pie Gal because there's a jackpot that's really high. They have a little computer on the table, and like if there's a mistake with a hand or whatever, the dealer can hit the computer and go back and see what you had. Like if you fold your hand by accident, they know every single card in that deck of cards. So they know what everybody has. They know what's going to win. Anybody that could hack that, and there are hackers out there with that ability, they're just printing money. It just shouldn't be done. It doesn't need to be done. You can
Right.
do it like I said with a hardwired camera.
Right.
And
Sometimes low
you
tech
solve
provides the high tech
yeah,
solution.
you solve all those issues.
Yeah.
I can't tell you how strongly I feel about that. I think other poker players need to speak out about this and get rid of the RFID cards.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that.
Not even to mention that I've heard through the grapevine, there's so much cheating going on in home games with these RFID cards. I mean, it's constant. And it's yet another reason why I don't want to play in home games. But people out there, if you play in home games for significant stakes, keep your eyes open.
Yeah,
it's happening.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, thank you very much for speaking about it. So it's important not just to have the common voice, but also players of notoriety, successful in speaking out and offering suggestions. Even if it's not exactly what you suggested, maybe what you're hearing, maybe what you're saying may reach the right ears of people who can make some good positive changes. So thank you for sharing that.
And I'm trying to do it in such a way that respects production.
Of course.
I know it's hard to put on these TV shows.
Yeah.
But I think it can be done where it's both more secure and it's not inconveniencing production.
Cool. I guess we'll see how poker continues to evolve. Poker Productions, Maury, Dan, all the guys there. I know they put their heart and soul into it. The production crew as well. That's for the WSOP main event, and so many live streams going on these days. If anything, people are just saying, okay, well, we want to do better. We want, if anything, they want to boast about being the most secure. So perhaps this gives them a good idea. We're going to move to the segment of the show where you guys, our Cards Chat community, send in your questions for our guests. Just a reminder, we have a dedicated thread on the forums for this. So as we announce who our future guests will be, please be sure to send in your questions. We have 2 question askers today. Each of them sent in multiple ones for you, David. Wants to know, Chica Benita will start us off. Do you... You're known for this, and in the game I played with you as well, you were wearing it, and in all your winners' pictures, the infamous hat, the Gunslinger hat. Do you have any story, any interesting or funny story tied to your hat?
I do have one kind of interesting story. So first of all, I started wearing the hats. I went through the airport in Australia in 2008, I believe, going there for the first time for the Aussie Millions. And I just saw a cool looking kangaroo hat in the airport. So I picked it up and started wearing it. And then my wife kind of made it as kind of like a good present. So she started giving me new hats,
nice.
once a year or something like that. So I currently, let me show you the one that I have.
Oh, sure.
That I've been using right now. This is the
Nice.
snakeskin one that I've been wearing currently. So
love it. Good stuff. Okay. Next question. Okay, so we've already established what attracts you to mixed games. We know, thank you, that's Chica Benita. But the second part of the question is, which type of poker is most difficult for you and why? Or we can say more challenging.
Ooh, I don't know if I want to say that one.
That's fine. You can pass.
That gives opponents a game to choose in the dealer's choice. So that's probably not the greatest idea. I do know.
Could we say whether it's a flop, stud, or draw game? Would that be enough? Or would you rather also not say
that? It's a flop game.
Okay.
There's plenty of flop games I'm good at, so that's fine.
That's fair. Okay.
That's actually a very good question. I just don't want to give that information away.
Totally fair. Okay, cool. Yeah. Is there anything Chica Benita wants to know that really annoys you while you play, both in live tournaments as well as in online events? Or, one annoys you here, one annoys you there, something like that.
Slow. People playing slow. I have zero problem with people taking their time if they have a decision, and even taking a lot of time. But people taking excessive amount of time to quote not give something away. One of my worst experiences was I went my deepest run in the main event, finishing 45th. On day 5, I had to play day 6. I had to play most of the day with Doc Sands. Who everybody knows is kind of famously slow. We were playing 4 hands a half hour. And,
Ooh, wow.
again, playing that slow, it doesn't give you any chance to use your skill, or
Right.
not as much chance to use your skill. So I didn't really lose any hands on that day. And I came into the day with a chip lead. But I came out of the day as one of the, bottom third of stacks,
Mm.
just from having not gotten to play any hands. And a large part of that was my table was playing that slow
Huh.
because of Doc Sands. And he's a
Interesting.
great poker player, and I don't dispute him taking his time, but he would take like 20 or 30 seconds just on a routine, like he had raised before the flop. Is he going to see bet? He knows
Hmm.
what he's going to do.
Hmm.
Just do it.
Hmm.
And I also think that slowness is something that can keep some people out of poker that we want in poker. Poker is supposed to be fun,
Right.
and there's just no need to make it that slow.
Cool.
And I guess I hate to do this because it shouldn't have to be a part of poker, but I think we're at the point where we need a shot clock. It just is what it is.
In every tournament?
Yeah, I think so.
Oh,
I think
wow. Okay. The
now
$60
in the mix.
nightly?
Well, I know, okay,
Okay.
but in the mixed tournaments, you don't really see it being that necessary either.
Right.
But at the very least, if we don't do the shot clock everywhere, because I get its cost, it's dealer training, and it's all that kind of stuff, players be willing to call out other players.
Uh-huh.
So if somebody's taking like 25 seconds every time pre-flop,
Yeah.
and they have their deuce 7 and they're taking 25 seconds to fold it,
Right.
call them out on it,
Yep.
and be nice about it. But why
Because it
waste
affects
everybody's
everyone
time?
at the table. Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Well, okay, that's fair. Um, Two more from Chica Bonita. Throughout your entire poker career, is there something specific you can point to that you're very proud of?
My integrity. I think I've been a person that not only have I been honest myself, but I go out of my way to try and keep the game honest for other people, and try and create a friendly environment. Now, I'm not the most talkative person at the table. Sometimes I can get real wrapped up in what I'm doing, but I'm very friendly. If you talk to me, I'm love to carry on a conversation. Poker is a social game, and I'd like to think that I've made the poker world a better place, just from being a good person inside of it.
Beautiful. Well, that's a beautiful answer. And one more from Chica Bonita. And I like this question a lot, actually. I think you will too. If you could earn as much from bowling as from poker, which would you choose?
Wow. When I was 20, I might have chosen bowling. Now, I like the freedom that poker gives me. I like the mental challenge of it. Yeah, I would choose poker. As much as I love bowling, I still love it. I miss doing it, but poker is what's in my heart. It's what I really was born to do.
Nice. Okay, cool. Acid Burn FX is our second question asker. Well, very creative questions from Acid Burn FX. David, if you had the superpower to give other people phobias, what interesting things would you make people afraid of, and why?
Wow, that's a heck of a question.
Yeah, right.
I don't think I don't think I would do that.
Mm,
The background that I come from, my father was a clinical psychologist, and he spent his whole life trying to help people with phobias. We dealt with a lot of people. I worked with him a little bit in his office,
mhm.
and we dealt with people that that they had phobias that crippled their life. It's just
Mm.
not something I would do.
Okay, fair. I like it. What poker rules would you change or eliminate if you had the power to do so?
Okay, this is actually I didn't quite get to this on the other question. It's a little off topic, but
Okay,
we were talking about the poker security stuff.
sure.
I want to really see regulated online poker. It may be too late for that. There's so much cheating and bots and dream machines and all that stuff that's in online poker now. But the only way to make online poker really playable is going to be to have a really, really good security team. And that's going to mean regulated like on the way that DraftKings is regulated,
Right.
on the way that Wall Street is regulated.
Yeah.
That's the only way that online poker is really going to be viable. Ask me that question again, and I'll give a little better response to it.
Sure. So if you could change or eliminate any rule in poker, which one would you choose, or which ones would you choose?
This is very minor, but it's wrong, and it's a recent change, so maybe it actually could happen. They made 2 changes to the stud games in this past year. The TDA did.
I was wondering if you talk about that. Okay.
I spoke to Matt Savage about this when I first saw it happen. I didn't know until it happened at the table. First is eliminating the double bet and 7-card stud. I see no point to make that change. The only thing that either a single or double bet does is add strategy to the game. You can still bet single, you can bet double, you can vary it, you can base it on what you think the other people will do. That's great. And then secondly, in the same game, in all the stud games, sometimes the dealer will expose the river card. And I never blame dealers. They're doing their best. Mistakes happen. Okay. But in the past, they used to like freeze the betting, or they would give the option for the person to be all in. Wasn't perfect, but I think it was fine. I don't think there was anything wrong with it. Now what they're doing is, if the last card gets exposed, the down card, the 7th street, they reshuffle the same way they would if a card got exposed and hold. What that has done, there's 2 things. The first is kind of superstition, not that important, but it is important to people, which is that it changes what their final card is.
Right.
And somebody that was going to win the pot that now gets a different card that loses the pot, they might not come back and play the next tournament. So that I don't want to happen, even though I know as a professional that it's equally likely to help or hurt.
Right.
I don't really care that much about that part, but other people do, and it affects the popularity of poker. But more importantly is that it opens up a very, very big opportunity for angle shooting. There's some players out there that would kind of get a glimpse of their card or see it and flick it up if they don't want it in order to get another card. And theoretically, the dealer's supposed to notice that and not let it happen. But we know how life is. We know people aren't paying attention sometimes. And somebody that's trying to shoot an angle could very easily flip up their 7th card and get a free shot at a replacement. And that would affect who wins the hand, and that should never happen.
Interesting point. Well, Matt, he listens to all the podcasts. We're very honored he listens to ours, and we did have him as a guest on episode number 51.
Matt's amazing. I love what Matt has done for poker. I hope he will use his influence to reconsider that rule, because I don't think it's a good change.
Well, one thing I know is that he and all of the board members of the TDA, they definitely, the feedback from all the players is the most important thing to them, and they're always asking for it. And obviously he's always on Twitter and stuff, so I'm sure he will hear this.
And by the way, we've discussed this at our mixed game, and most of the people in our mixed game are WSOP regulars.
Yep.
We all agree. This is not just my opinion.
Okay, interesting. Well, I don't know when the next TDA meeting will be. It's a 1 or 2 year, every annual or biannual thing, but I'm sure Matt will be taking notes. That's for sure. So thanks for sharing that too. So good question, Acid Burn FX. We got some important info out there. Maybe 2 or 3 more from them, and then we'll wrap it up. What is something amazing that you did, David, but no one was around to see it?
And this is kind of part of why I do the recaps that I do on the tournaments. I made the greatest call that I've ever made in a World Series horse event with about 3 tables left. There was a very tricky player, good player, somewhere from like kind of Eastern Europe. I don't remember the exact country. And he bluffed me in an Omaha high-low hand. He raised me on the turn and bet the river. And I called him down with the very bottom pair on the board. I believe it was 6s. And it was not like I was like on tilt or anything like that. I felt it. I don't know what it was, and this is what I talk about God-given talent. But I just felt he was bluffing. And everything, it not quite the level of the Robbie call with the Jack 4, but it was a call that made zero sense. And in a matter of fact, probably like re-raising made more sense.
Right.
But I just felt it. I just knew it. I played with the player for a while and observed him. This wasn't the first tournament we played together. But the call with that, an Omaha 8 with all the cards and possibilities, and I don't recall the exact board. I wish I could, but
wow,
that was the best call I've ever made in my life, and it was in an important stage in a tournament.
That's very cool. Great answer to that question. Two more. I think we can do two more. What is your favorite thing that you own?
Oh, wow. Well, I don't know if own is quite the correct word, but I have two cats that I love to death.
Oh, that's
so I miss them a lot when I'm traveling also. As a second answer is definitely something that I own is I love to drive. I drive like a maniac, and it's a little older now, but I have an Infiniti M45 that drives kind of like a race car, and I love it. I just love driving like that. So
that's cool. Very nice. And last one for you, David, from Acid Burn FX. If you could learn any skill you wanted without trying, just instantly snap your fingers and you have this skill, which one would you pick and why?
I would like to be able to play basketball at an NBA level.
Oh, that's cool.
I've always I'm a big Laker fan. You can see I'm wearing the hat.
Yeah.
I used to play poker. I used to play poker with more Frank Mariani than Jerry Buss, but I got to play with both of them.
That's cool.
And I played basketball as a kid. I'm awful, and it would be nice, one day to be able to, to play like Steph Curry or LeBron James. So
that's super cool. I'm a fellow Laker fan, born and raised in Los Angeles, so my heart's with you. How'd you end up becoming a Laker fan? From Missouri originally, and then in Georgia.
That's a funny story because I was a big Hawks fan, being from Georgia. A bigger Dominique Wilkins fan because he went to the University of Georgia. He's about the same age as me.
Human highlight film, yeah.
When the Hawks traded Dominique Wilkins to the Clippers for Danny Manning, of all people, I boycotted the Hawks. I just stopped being a fan. I actually stopped being an NBA fan for a while.
Wow.
And then when I got into poker, I was, I knew that Jerry Buss and Frank Mariani both played poker, and so it was just a natural. And that was at about the same time that Kobe and Shaq were beginning together, so they were fun to watch. And so since then, I've just been a gigantic Lakers fan. That's awesome. Repair my relationship with the Hawks a little bit in the fact that I met Dominique Wilkins, and he follows me on Twitter. I'm proud of that, and he's a great guy. And so, I still have a little affection in my heart for the Hawks, but them trading him that killed me. I was a huge fan and young and impressionable at the time.
That's super cool. I mean, it's funny, little just wearing a hat comes the greatest stories. That's very cool. Guys, thank you so much for sending your questions in for David Bach. And again, a friendly reminder to all of you out there in the Cards Chat community, we would love to see you submit your questions for our future podcast guests in the dedicated thread on the forums. Please be sure to give us a good review on iTunes and spread the word via your social media channels if you like the show. David, before we let you go, is there anything else you'd like to share with us?
I think I've kind of gotten to everything. I did want to address, I guess I kind of already did a little bit, but I'm very much in favor of what's happened with Jake Schindler and Ali Imsirovic. That the poker community seems to be coming together to stop that level of cheating. I think it's really, really important. I think we're actually kind of in a little bit of a time where we can really help ourselves with all this exposure that's happened due to the Hustler Casino Live potential scandal. Let's take this time to try and make things more honest and secure, and make this a poker a good place for the people that we want in poker. I was listening to somebody on Joey Ingram's podcast earlier today. I can't remember the name, JR, I think it was, like a real wealthy tech guy that was playing in the mixed games. And he basically said he's kind of done with the games because, in part, because of all this stuff that he's heard about. You know, a lot of these players didn't know this kind of stuff was possible.
Right.
We really need those players with money that can afford to lose it, that treat poker like a recreational hobby. We need those people in our game. We desperately need those people in our game. In order to do that, we have to let them know they know they're not going to win. They're not as good as the professionals. They're not even as good as amateurs. But they deserve a fair shake. Yeah. And they need to know that when they sit down at the poker table, they're getting a fair gamble. Just like if they went to the casino, they know they're probably going to lose, but they get a fair gamble.
Exactly.
And we need to make sure as a community that we give that to them. And I think the exposure that's currently going on gives us an opportunity to make the changes to do that.
I like it. Great, very important message, and a good one on which to end the show. Thank you again very much to David Bach. Thank you all for tuning in once again to another episode of the CardsChat Podcast. I'm Robbie Straczynski. You can follow me on Twitter at CardPlayerLife. I wish you all a wonderful day.